For the children's space TV show, see Space Races. Space Race is a BBC docudrama series first shown in Britain on BBC Two between September and October 2005, chronicling the major events and characters in the American-Soviet space race up to the first landing of a man on the moon. It focuses on Sergei Korolev, the Soviet chief rocket designer, and Wernher von Braun, his American counterpart. The series was a joint effort between British, German, American and Russian production teams. Reception. Awards. Royal Television Society 2006 nominated RTS Television Award for Best Production Design, Alan Spaulding. Sir Arthur Clarke Award 2006 won Sir Arthur Clarke Award for Best Presentation. Episodes. Episode 1, Race for Rockets. We see the results of Wernher von Braun's work on the V2 for the Nazis at Mittelwerk in Peenemünde, and his final activities within Germany during the last years of the Second World War, as both American and Soviet forces raced to capture German rocket technology. When the Americans gained the upper hand by recovering von Braun and most of his senior staff, along with all the technical documents and much other material, we see Sergei Korolev's release from the Gulag to act as the Soviets' rocketry expert alongside former colleague Valentin Glashko, and how he is set to work bringing Soviet rocket technology up to date with that of von Braun, working with what material and personnel are left after von Braun's escape to the US. Episode 2, Race for Satellites. As the Cold War intensifies, Korolev is asked to build a rocket capable of carrying a 5-ton warhead to America. He designs and constructs the R-7 Semyorka, the first ICBM, and is later allowed to use it to launch the first satellite, Sputnik 1, quickly following up with the rushed Sputnik 2. Meanwhile, von Braun struggles to persuade the U.S. government to allow him to launch his own satellite after Sputnik's launch and the failure of the U.S. Navy to launch a Vanguard satellite. He is finally allowed to launch the first American satellite, Explorer 1. Korolev announces that the Americans have evened the score and that they are in a space race, which they intend to win. At the end of the episode we see the silhouettes of two men walking down a corridor. One appears to be in a spacesuit. This could be Yuri Gagarin. Episode 3, Race for Survival. Both the Americans and Soviets are planning manned spaceflight, and we see both sides preparing to do so with the development of the Vostok program and Project Mercury, as well as basic details about the capsules and the delivery vehicles. We also see some of the selection and training of the Russian cosmonauts, and rather less of that of the counterparts in the US. After difficulties and failures on both sides, including a side story about a catastrophic failure of one of the first Russian ballistic missiles, the Soviets succeed in putting Yuri Gagarin into space first, with the Americans putting Alan Shepard up shortly afterwards. Episode 4, Race for the Moon. Both sides now plan to put a man on the moon. The Americans pull ahead in the space race with Project Gemini, but then suffer a disaster with the Apollo 1 fire. Meanwhile, despite a few notable successes such as the first spacewalk by Alexei Leonov, the Soviet space program struggles to keep up amid internal strife. Glashko and Korolev permanently fall out in an argument about fuel. Korolev turns to Nikolai Kuznetsov to develop engines instead. Kuznetsov delivers the NK-33, very efficient but much less powerful than the Americans' F-1. The Soviet program suffers further blows when Korolev dies during surgery. Gagarin dies in a jet crash. Soyuz 1 crashes and kills Vladimir Komarov, and the prototype booster for the moonshot, the N-1 rocket, fails to successfully launch. In America, von Braun has continuing difficulties with the Saturn V, especially combustion instability in the large F-1 engine, but these are ultimately quickly overcome almost by brute force at great expense, and the rocket successfully launches the first manned lunar mission, Apollo 8, and the first manned lunar landing, Apollo 11. The final episode finishes with brief textual summaries of the remaining careers of the various people involved. Production details. BBC filmed the space race in and around the town of Sibiu, Transylvania. Romania has signed the EU co-production treaty, which allows for EU co-productions. Compared to other locations, Romania attracted BBC with unspoiled natural locations, experienced crews and moderately priced production facilities. The series was filmed with the Panasonic SDX900 DVC-PR050 professional camcorder. This allowed keeping to the speedy shooting schedule and provided the gritty look appropriate to the time period. Shot in widescreen 25 fps progressive mode, the series deliver a rich, filmic feel, which compares favorably with high definition. Cast: Richard Delane, Wernher von Braun, Steve Nicholson, Sergei Korolev, John Warnaby, Vasily Misin, Ravil Isinov, Valentin Glashko, Rupert Wickham, Kurt H. Debus, Tim Woodward, Marshall Mitrofan Netherlands, Eric Lauren, Kastenholtz, Chris Robson, Dieter Hazel, Mark Dexter, Stava, Oliver de la Fost, Stav as Lieutenant, Vitaly Ursu, Yuri Gagarin, Oleg Stefan, Alexei Leonov, Maria Mironova, Nina, Jeffrey Wickham, Kuznetsov, Robert Jezik, Robert R. Gilrath, Robert Lindsay, narrator, Stuart Bunce, Levguy Dukov, David Barris, Helmut Grotrup, Konstantin Gregory, Nikita Khrushchev, Simon Day, Kamla, Nicholas Rowe, R. V. Jones, Mikhail Gorovoy, Ivan Serov, Stephen Grief, Colonel Holger Tolstoy, Anna Barkan, Ksenia Koroleva, Max Bollinger, Russian cosmonaut, Todd Boyce, Alan Shepard, Emil Mandanak, Vyacheslav Lapo, Russian sound technician, Mihai Dinvail, German scientist, Anthony Edridge, Chris Kraft. Inaccuracies and errors. Most of the historical and technological data presented in the series is very heavily simplified, and sometimes contains outright untruths or errors. The series would best be described and interpreted as giving a general impression of the subject matter, rather than rigorous factual account. Factual errors. An early scene shows Serov executing Polish resistance fighters who discovered a V2. Nothing of the sort happened. A team of British and Polish soldiers and scientists formed a mission to retrieve a fallen V2 near Blizna in Poland. Footage showing early Rocket Club activity of von Braun actually shows Reinhold Teiling's rockets, a rival to the VFR club that von Braun belonged to. The VFR rockets were crude engines attached to sticks. Key figures are entirely missing from the presented history. Andrei Tupolev, Vladimir Shalom and Mikhail Yangel are also conspicuously absent, for example, even in the sequence depicting the disastrous explosion of Yangel's prototype R-16 ICBM. In the series, Glashko is generally identified with all rocket projects competing with Korolev within the USSR, even those for which he had only partial responsibility or was a subcontractor. The narrator said twice that the Mercury Redstone could put an astronaut into orbit. In reality, the best the Redstone rocket could do was putting an astronaut into a 15-minute suborbital ballistic trajectory, which peaked out around 120 miles up. The first orbital flight of an American astronaut did not occur until the 20th of February 1962, when the Mercury capsule was put into orbit with a more powerful Atlas rocket. Indeed, NASA report TMX 53107 called Mercury Redstone a prelude to an orbital flight program. However, at Episode 3, Race for Survival is at pains to disclaim orbital capability. The narrator says only that the V-derived redstone has only a tenth of the power of Korolev's rocket. Barely enough to put a man into space. Quote, "This of course is why Freedom 7, Alan Shepard's redstone-launched capsule, was suborbital." The narrator states that Gagarin flies over a sleeping America, even though Vostok's flight path did not take the craft anywhere near North America, except the Aleutian Islands. Gagarin did say, "I'm over America," though. America, of course, includes South America, and Vostok 1's flight path did just touch America in that sense. Gagarin spoke at night, while still over the Pacific, but only 3 minutes from the Straits of Magellan. A little earlier he was near Hawaii, which had become one of the United States of America less than 2 years earlier. Episode 1 features a map of Europe with wrongly indicated countries. Switzerland is labeled Austria, Austria is labeled Yugoslavia, and the Czech Republic is labeled Hungary. Episode 1 featuring the capture of Wernher von Braun. He had a bad fracture of his arm, which were not depicted. In Episode 2, the narrator states twice that the R7 rocket has 32 engines. This is not entirely correct. The R7 and its successors have 4 side boosters and a core booster. Each side booster has a single rocket engine with 4 combustion chambers, 2 Wernher combustion chambers, and 1 set of turbopumps. The central core has a similar engine but with 4 Wernher combustion chambers instead of 2. This makes total of 32 chambers, not engines. In the scene where Glushko is supposedly testing the clustering scheme, only 1 engine is shown. One of the cosmonauts, after seeing the Vostok's cockpit for the first time, asks where the controls are. Also, the Gagarin flight scene indicates that there were no controls inside. In fact, controls were present on board the Vostoks, but they were blocked to prevent the cosmonauts from manipulating them. A set of codes was placed aboard, so that the cosmonaut could unlock the controls if necessary. When the mission control is shown for the first time in Episode 3, it shows that all the flight controllers have a TV screen showing the launch pad. In reality, only the flight director had a TV screen. The other consoles had only meters to measure the various systems. In Episode 4, the narrator states that, if they fail to lock into the moon's orbit, they will fly on, forever lost in space. In fact, Apollo 8 used a free return trajectory that would have taken them back to Earth had the engine performing lunar orbit injection failed. Unconfirmed statements. The series stresses out in multiple times that Korolev was denounced by Glushko. There are no known documents that prove this statement besides rumors and hearsay. Glushko had been imprisoned himself before Korolev was arrested and had been sentenced to 8 years in a prison camp for participating in sabotage organization. Quote, "He was retained to work for the NKVD to develop aircraft jet boosters. In 1942, at Glushko's request, NKVD transferred Korolev from another prison to Glushko's OKB. Companion book. A companion book to the series was written by Deborah Cadbury. Selected editions. Cadbury, Deborah. Space Race. 4th of State. ISBN 9780007209958. Cadbury, Deborah. The Space Race, The Battle to Rule the Heavens. Harper Perennial. ISBN 9780007209941.